What's up guys, I'm James, and welcome back to the Great Gambino Watch Reviews. The past couple of years, a common debate I've tried to sort out in my own head was whether to purchase the Omega Speedmaster or Seamaster. I know that these are two very different types of watches, but if it is something that I have spent so much time debating myself, I figured there are others out there trying to make the same decision. Now that I own and have reviewed both pieces, I get several requests to do a comparison. Before we get started, I want to point out that this comparison will be between the 2021 released Omega Speedmaster and the latest model of the Seamaster 300. So let's get into that right now. One of the main topics of debate when deciding between these two timepieces is over the sizing and how well they fit and wear on the wrist. I have a 6.75-inch wrist, and I can say based on my own wrist size, the Speedmaster definitely seems to look better proportioned for me. Let's break down why. Most of the time, people immediately look at the case width and try to decide whether a watch will be an appropriate fit for them, when they should actually be checking the lug-to-lug measurement first. With these two models, they both have a case width of 42 millimeters, but when looking at the lug-to-lug measurement, the Seamaster measures 50 millimeters compared to the Speedmaster's 47.2 millimeters, which will have a significant difference on the wrist. Another characteristic that I would like to point out is that 2 millimeters of the Speedmaster that protrude out on the right side are actually part of the crown guard. Because of this, I feel when I look down at it, it visually appears to be more of a 40mm watch on the wrist. When comparing the case thickness between the two, they both measure in at 13.5 millimeters. But again, the Speedmaster appears to be thinner. One reason for this is the way the brush center portion of the case is cut slimmer on the Speedmaster. Also, both models have twisted polished lugs, but the Speedmaster's blends into a fully chamfered edge, which helps create more of the thin illusion. Another area that makes the Seamaster look thicker is the upper portion, which is all bezel. However, the Speedmaster is a combination of bezel and domed hesselite. Because the hesselite is clear, it doesn't feel like it adds to the thickness of the case. Now let's take a look at the bands. In 2020, when I was debating between these two, the Speedmaster had a completely different band, which the end links protruded out, causing the lug-to-lug width to seem larger and not fit snug against my wrist. As you see here with the updated bracelet of the 2021 Speedmaster, this is no longer an issue. Another area of change with the new Speedy that makes it appear to wear smaller is that we have an extreme taper from 20mm to 15mm by the clasp. When looking at the Seamaster, the entire bracelet is 20mm with no taper at all, causing it to be more bulky. This is really noticeable when it comes to comparing the clasps. The clasp on the Seamaster is much larger than what we have on the Speedmaster. Preference on design is based on individual opinion, but for me, I prefer the Speedmaster as it has more of a luxury aesthetic. As far as functionality, they both have a double push button release with a combination of milled parts, but you will only have the option of 2 micro adjustment slots with the Speedy, while on the other hand, you get a fully functional glide lock and an added diver extension on the 300, which has proven to be very useful in my experiences. Comparing the glass, the Seamaster features a domed piece of sapphire crystal that has an anti-reflective treatment on the top and bottom sides of the glass. It makes a massive difference when you are in bright sunlight because sometimes the glass seems to completely disappear as if there is no glass at all. Sapphire is very scratch resistant. On the other hand, with the Speedmaster, we have a piece of hesselite, which is much more prone to scratches. However, these scratches can be mostly removed with a product called Polywatch. The use of hesselite has been done to stay true with the astronaut theme of the watch, as hesselite will not shatter and splinter into small pieces in space. It is important to point out that they do make a sapphire sandwich version of the Speedmaster that uses sapphire on the top and bottom display case. I chose to purchase the hesselite version because I felt it had a more warm vintage look with the curved round edges of the glass. One thing that I have noticed between these two types of glass is that the Seamaster collects smudge marks much more often than the Speedmaster. It's not too much of a problem, as a quick wipe from a microfiber cloth brings it back to a crystal clear view of the dial. The differences continue with the bezels. The Speedmaster has a thin, fixed aluminum insert bezel that ties in with the overall vintage theme and iconic look that we come to expect from the Moonwatch, while the Seamaster is very modern with its bezel insert being made of ceramic with enamel-filled numerals. There is no question the Omega Seamaster bezel is going to be more resistant to scratches and do a much better job holding up throughout time. And of course, because it is a diver, the bezel can be rotated to 120 clicks for timing. While the Speedmaster may not have a rotating dive bezel, you will be able to use the chronograph feature for timing up to 12 hours. The dials couldn't be more different on these. I wouldn't say either of these watches are minimalistic looking, but the Speedmaster does have its traditional look with basic white hour, minute, chrono, and subdial hands. This 2021 version did add the step dial that was not in the few years previous, but other than that, it's what you would expect from a Speedmaster. Switching over to the 300, it's a completely different scenario. I like to compare this piece to a flashy sports car, where it is somewhat exotic with its laser-cut ceramic dial and maxi-applied indices. Everything is sleek and glossy. I feel if someone outside of watch collecting compared these two with an untrained eye, they would assume the 300 is the more expensive luxury watch. When the lights are off, again, it's the Seamaster which has that extra level of flair with its multicolored blue and green applications of superluminova. Looking over at the Speedmaster, you can see that Omega stuck with a consistent green superluminova. I enjoy the fun of having two colors with the 300, but in my experience, it seems that the Speedy stays brighter for a little bit longer. Flipping around back, let's talk about the movements. As you can see here, the Seamaster has a sapphire crystal display case back showing off the caliber 8800 movement. For the Hesselite version of the Speedmaster, unfortunately we do not have a display case back, but instead its caliber 3861 movement is safely covered up by the stainless steel case back that has the seahorse logo in the center, surrounded by text that reads, "Flight qualified by NASA in 1965 for all manned space missions." It also says, "The first watch worn on the moon." The 3861 is a very beautiful movement, and if you did want to have a clear view of it, then I recommend going with the sapphire sandwich version of the Speedy. When comparing the movements, the 8800 is an automatic and manual winding movement, whereas the 3861 will need to be hand wound every couple of days. I rather enjoy winding the Speedmaster, and it is a task that I have come to look forward to. While turning the crown, it feels smooth with a clean, snappy, and audible click. On the other hand, winding the Seamaster feels more silky, buttery smooth, and is overall much quieter. Let's hear what they sound like. The Seamaster gets a 55-hour power reserve, which is 5 more hours than the Speedy, but they're both master chronometers certified by Metis and are resistant to magnetic fields reaching up to 15,000 Gauss. When it comes to water resistance, the Seamaster 300 being a diver is going to get the clear win with its 300 meters of water resistance. While I wouldn't recommend swimming with your Speedy, it gets up to 50 meters of water resistance. To wrap things up with my final thoughts, I think both watches are amazing quality timepieces and you can't go wrong deciding one over the other. I feel the Seamaster will give you more of that modern luxury watch feeling with a greater wrist presence, and we should mention it carries strong ties with the James Bond films dating all the way back to 1995. However, the Speedmaster definitely holds a more important place in watch horology, being the first timepiece worn on the moon back in 1969. Between the two, I would have to say the Speedy is more iconic, and even though I wear the Seamaster more often, if I was purchasing today, I would most likely choose the Speedmaster first. But that is just my personal opinion. Well, I hope you guys liked this video. Thank you for sticking around all the way until the end, and I'll see you in the next one.